Hello! Thank you for being in a new video. This time I have an unboxing of the Vivo V40. Let's get started. From my point of view, this device should be named Vivo V40 Pro because it really has specs that take it slightly closer to the high end. It has very good storage and some other little details that I'll tell you about in a moment. But it's just been announced in Mexico. So, its launch price in this region is 15,999 pesos. On the screen you see the reference price in dollars to give you an idea. Although remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. In Mexico, generally prices are much higher than in other countries. So, speaking of the Mexican context, I think it gets to compete in an interesting way. Let's take it out of the box so we can get to know it little by little and see how it has some pretty high points and some pretty high details. And as you can see, here we have the device. There are a few points that the manufacturer highlights, but first I'm going to take it out of this little bag. Watch, he says professional camera from Zeiss. Remember that Vivo has a very close collaboration with Zeiss. I've said it on multiple occasions, their high point in this collaboration is the Vivo X100 Ultra, which has a spectacular camera. So a lot of that collaboration and all that engineering that they have behind the imaging engine with Zeiss is present in this device as well. And that's something that can definitely get some attention. Another highlight will be the intelligent aura light, which remember is sort of a replacement for the traditional flash. In this case, it's a light that can be projected in a slightly different way. We will also find 12 gigabytes of physical RAM, plus another 12 virtual ones. The virtual ones do not consider them. They are not necessary. And finally, the battery in Vivo is called Blue Volt. It's 5,500 milliamp hours. That's a considerably large battery, also taking into account that it's a very thin device. It's surprising to see a battery of this capacity, and also accompanied by a flash charge of 80 watts. So we find in it a tremendous battery, tremendous charge, tremendous RAM, and tremendous collaboration with Zeiss. Right off the bat you realize that this is a device that could definitely be considered one of the darlings of the Vivo catalog. So let me take this sticker off. Now let's get this device powered up, and while it's powering up we see a little bit of its design. It's got a very smooth cover on the back. There's virtually no fingerprints on it. That's something that I liked, even though it's a very smooth device. So let's see what else is in the box. We found a completely opaque case. That's something I like because the clear cases turn yellow after a little bit of time. So this one is probably going to have a better shelf life. Let's see what it looks like with the device on. Honestly, I like this reflective design that it has. And it's going to get completely lost when you put the case on. I don't dislike the design though. It still feels kind of nice. Especially since it's not a completely dark holster. It has a sort of texture to it that generates a certain sheen, resulting in a nice touch. And it's still not a very thick device with the case on. As usual, tell me in the comments if you would use this device with a case or without a case. I haven't made my decision yet. I think I'd prefer without a case. But let's see what else is in here. There will be the sheets and documents, better known as papers of a lifetime. There's nothing very relevant here. But what is relevant is the charger that we were talking about. This one of 80 watts, accompanied by the USB cable. In this case, what I didn't like so much is that it's still USB-A, the connector that goes to the charger. To give the feeling of being more modern, it would be very nice to find USB-C here, but it's a small detail. The truth is that it is a very powerful charger. Powerful. And obviously you have to use the original cable if you want to keep the fastest possible charge. Finally, as part of the box, we will find the tool to remove the SIM card. And that's it. So let me go back and put all of this content away. And I'll get back with you to take a full look at the specifications that we'll find. I've already got the device set up. Let's take a look at some of its specifications. As you can see, in this case, an update has just arrived. Obviously, for the review, this update will need to be installed so that we have the latest software. It has a thickness of 7.6 millimeters and it weighs 190 grams. In addition, it has IP level 68 resistance against water and dust. So from there, we begin to see attractive points. Ones that position it as a device a little bit closer to a sort of premium line. Still within the mid-range, but with a premium treatment, so to speak. The back cover comes with a completely smooth design. On the front, we find a 6.78-inch AMOLED display on its diagonal, with a resolution of 1260 by 2800 pixels. That is, it is a slightly higher resolution than Full HD. It offers 120 Hz in its refresh rate, and a peak brightness of 4500 nits. It's a very good quality display, no doubt about it. In addition, it comes protected with Scott Sensation Alpha, a sort of alternative to Gorilla Glass, which Vivo usually uses on its high-end devices, so it is appreciated that we also see it here. This display notes that it will be able to emit more brightness in some areas because it does feature this HDR technology. Notice the difference between a normal photograph and a photograph with this technology. I don't know if through the camera you can distinguish it, but definitely the screen can give you a very realistic feeling when you see the pictures you take with this device. This time we also find stereo sound, a speaker at the bottom and another one in the earpiece area for calls. This is important because last generation I complained that it was mono sound, and finally they have evolved to give us stereo sound as a device of this price should. The front camera is 50 megapixels with f2.0 point aperture and autofocus. It's a camera that could definitely be considered high-end, because autofocus is something that most manufacturers reserve only for the high-end. Although Vivo puts a lot of emphasis on selfies and several of their devices have this feature. This is just a preview of the camera, so you'll notice how in the higher light area it's completely burned out. But after taking the picture, it does an excellent processing. Now the cloud textures do show up, so the front camera has a good quality, good level of detail, and overall it will be a very competitive camera. On the back we will find two cameras. At first I don't like this so much because in the price range I think I can perfectly well demand 3 cameras with the correct configuration. Ultra-wide, main and telephoto, but in this case we will only see ultra-wide and main. That is, there is no telephoto camera to help us for a better zoom. We will find the ultra-wide camera with 50 megapixels, f2.0 point aperture and autofocus, so it can work as a macro camera as well. And then the main camera with 50 megapixels, f1.9 aperture and optical stabilization plus autofocus. It doesn't have such a wonderful aperture, but I think by having 2 high-resolution sensors and also optical stabilization on the main camera, it could give us a good night performance, although we'll confirm that in the review. But as I say, we did not find a telephoto camera and that is something that disappoints. Although thanks to the collaboration with Zeiss, we will be able to preserve optical quality when taking pictures with the 2x setting, and that will be especially useful when taking portrait shots. Note that it allows us to take portraits at 24, 35 or 50 millimeters, 3 different perspectives that can give us an interesting result. Plus it has the aura light on the back that even allows you to modify its temperature in case you are in warmer or cooler lighting. This is something that no one is going to offer you. I've only seen it on live devices. In fact, it has an automatic temperature adjustment that, thanks to the sensor that it has in this bottom part, can adapt the warm or cool light depending on how the ambient light is. And it is specifically in the portrait mode where all the collaboration with Zeiss is reflected, as it includes different blur effects that you can apply in your photos to give it a much more advanced look and not simply the natural blur that other devices integrate. So yes, you can find a very advanced portrait in this model. However, for the zoom it may fall a little short, although it offers a maximum zoom 20x. Fortunately, it has the ability to record video in 4K at 30 frames per second, or it can also be in full HD at 60 frames per second. Although the ultra-wide camera can't record at 60 frames per second, but it can record in 4K. On the other hand, the front camera can also record video in 4K or full HD at 60 frames per second as well. Video recording doesn't seem to be its specialty. Possibly in this price range it comes to fall just short in quality. The battery is 5500 mAh. That's a very good figure, considering it's a pretty slim device. Surely the battery is going to be one of its strongest points, although we will have to check that with the tests we do, and in the video review I will tell you everything. For now, we are only knowing part of its specifications. It also supports 80 watts charging, and the advantage is that the charger is also included in the box. By the way, it includes an in-display fingerprint reader. This is an optical reader, so it's not that advanced, but in the price range it's the norm. We did not expect something superior. It also comes with Android 14 and Phone Touch OS 14. And as you can see, in this case it is already receiving an update that is even improving the camera behavior. So even though I had already taken some pictures to do the review, we're going to have to take them again thanks to this update that it just received. Which is good news because it means that the manufacturer is concerned about further optimizing the experience of the cell phone. What it also comes with 512 gigabytes of storage and 12 gigabytes of RAM. Definitely that both in RAM and storage gives the feeling of being a completely flagship device. Normally it's hard to see 512 gigabytes in the mid-range. Even in the high end there are still many models with 128 or 256 gigabytes, leaving the 512 edition for a much more expensive edition. So this is one of its strongest points. And the processor is the Snapdragon 7 Gen 3. Although in this case we haven't seen evolution over the last generation, but it's a considerably good chip. And here I have the benchmark results, if you want to have a little bit clearer reference of the performance. On Geekbench, on single core it scored 1,143 points and multi-core 3,178. So it is a completely similar score to the last generation. In that sense we see no evolution in power, whereas in Antutu it scored 809,827 points. I think it is a considerably good processor, although as I tell you it is the same processor as last generation. So despite not seeing an evolution as such in the processor, I think it's still a good processor. I don't think it's going to be a very gaming-focused device, although it's not going to disappoint. But the most demanding are going to find better options in terms of power. However, remember that the priority of this device will be the design, portraits, and possibly the battery. But in the video review, I will tell you many more details. For now, we have come to the end of this video. If you liked it, you know you can tell me about it, and see you next time.